This is Ivic Wolf from the Perseverance podcast and Furry.fm on OwOmacon. If you like my voice, feel free to tune in tomorrow for a group discussion on furry conferences and the new virtual con craze.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Culturally Eft panel. We will be talking about the process for our YouTube show and some things we have in the pipeline. I'm Tempo. Joining me, as always, is our ever busy producer.
Producer, performer, editor, costume designer, set designer.
He wears many hats, and all of them are fursuits.
Yeah. Sometimes they're fursuit hats.
Right, yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, Culturally Eft is a long-running, award-winning YouTube pop culture analysis channel, and we focus on furry things. So we focus on furry media, furry culture, conventions, fursuits. We're in the middle of a series right now on fursuit history,
We're
and
nearing
so
the end of the series, really. Most of it is already up and online.
right.
And I have our Ursa Major Award right here.
Ooh.
It's transparent, so it's a little hard to read, but
It's like we do all of our on-screen graphics in a very
Yep,
low-tech way like
they're
that.
all
They're
practical.
all plexiglass. All right. So, should we start them off on how a typical episode comes together?
Sure. I mean, it's usually the script and the idea, right?
Yeah.
We start off with a general thought process of how can we talk about a media we're excited about, or we haven't really fully talked about this aspect of the furry fandom yet. How can we write 2 to 4 pages of this? And trying to find ways to write about it that haven't already been explored on YouTube.
Yeah, we try not
That's
to
one of the
double dip
challenges is we want to
yeah.
be a little different.
And often these ideas we kind of kick them around for a while before we really settle on what we want to talk about with them. So sometimes we'll have ideas, and especially if they're not super time sensitive, like if the show isn't currently running or about to come out, we won't really worry too much about having it be, immediate, because we'd prefer that it be good. Like, having it immediate is great, but it's fleeting, and most of the content people will watch on our channel will be older content from whenever they come in. And
There's a special word for that. It's called evergreen content. There's the content that's hot and new for right now and will be relevant for about a week or so. And there's content that you can watch all the time because it's never too late to talk about DuckTales or Guardians of the Galaxy or furries and their weird
right.
ways.
Right. People will still remember them, and people are still talking about them, and people are still talking about She-Ra and Steven Universe and whatever else, after those things have ended. So typically, like, the first step is we have an idea and we kind of workshop it between between the two of us and with our friends, and then it starts to become cohesive enough that we then have the basis for a script. And so usually I do the bulk of the script work, but Arrkay totally jumps in and modifies stuff to be a little easier to read is the main one. I'm like read into a camera.
The first third of the show, I was writing 90% of the episodes, but I would often have guest writers. And then Tempo came along and started churning out scripts for me, so that's one less job I had to do on the show.
And really, like, writing scripts for YouTube uses a lot of the same skills that you already learned in school for writing, like a book report or what have you. You really just need to, it's about clarifying your thoughts beforehand, like kind of being organized.
Yeah, trying your best to be accurate.
Yeah.
and researched and hopefully provide links.
Right. Yeah. Like citation needed. Um, and also finding a way to explain it that makes sense to your audience takes a good chunk of the time. Like thinking about how your audience is going to view the content as opposed to the new component of it that you're very excited about talking about. So, you know, that's, always, I always recommend when people are going to work on an essay, whether it's video or not, that you think about who it's actually for, like who your target audience kind of is, like how much do they know about the property, how used to your terminology are they going to be, like if you're going to talk about Shira and you're going to talk about queer theory, does your audience know what that is, or should you stop and explain it? And so in the case of YouTube, it's usually, yeah, you should explain it.
At least a little bit, or link to somewhere relevant that will explain it in more detail than you can. Especially
Right.
since we make really short format content, which is usually around 10 minutes.
So
Don't
yeah,
make a
we
lot
should
of
talk
videos
about
on the 40-second mark.
our fight, our eternal fight with the algorithms.
I generally don't ever make content for the algorithm. I haven't for a very long time. I tried once and it lasted very shortly because it's very stressful.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't immersed in the ever swirling vortex of YouTube's algorithms, the site is set up to promote content that it thinks will take off, but ultimately they're shooting they're shooting in the dark, and they don't 100% know, because there's no way that they could have their staff like watch a video and say, oh, that's good. And so they use metrics like, is your show between X and time period and Y time period long? And then a bunch of creators try to chase that particular whale and, have their video meet the criteria for the algorithms to be promoted.
Yeah,
Long
and
term,
the
it's
algorithm is also constantly shifting. So it will, for a while, it was rewarding long format videos, which is how Let's Plays and gaming really took off on that platform. And then it would reward content that was being uploaded like weekly or twice a week. So it shifts and changes at the whim of Google and Alphabet Industries, or whatever their parent company is. So it's just too much of a hassle, really. But the downside to that is, of course, then we get lost in the algorithm, or we don't release a video for a few months. Um, that's just
and
how it
all
goes.
and ultimately, like, quality does bear out. Like if you have quality content, that really bypasses all of the bells and whistles of the site. I have totally had sites I go to for like one or two really good shows. Like I remember back when you could only watch, I think you could only watch extra credits on The Escapist and like Yahtzee's reviews on The Escapist, and I would go to their site to do it because it was good enough content that I liked it. And so in the end, no matter what medium you're working in, if you do it really well and you are working on things that you're passionate about, that will show through in the final product, and people will eventually care about it. And like to some degree, it's, you have to like recognize your successes. Like that's one thing that, whether I've been working on the YouTube channel or writing books, it's really easy for me to get so caught up in the process that I don't recognize that, oh wow, like this would have been, this many viewers on this video would have been a big deal to me a year ago or 2 years ago, and now it's every video seems to get several hundred views, or a couple thousand views, or 10,000 views, or whatever it is. And we also find that things are really a roll of the dice. Like once so to continue with our process thing, we write a script and then we shoot the footage for it and we edit it together. And the like sometimes we throw in a lot of visuals and do a lot of memes
Yeah,
and things, and sometimes it's fairly straightforward and more documentarian.
yeah. So when Tempo gives me a script, one thing I have to do before we film is read it all out loud and change it and update it to fit my voice and my speaking cadence and mannerisms, and also find unexpected typos, like a word that's repeated twice in a sentence, or unfortunate alliteration or something. These things just happen and your brain doesn't quite pick them up when they're written down, but when it doesn't reveal itself until you speak it out loud. Um, and I
And you can
usually
do
go
this
into
even
bed
if you're
long
on your
before
own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, sorry, I got excited about typos. I didn't mean to talk over you.
Totally all right.
So he, he films the stuff, and then
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that, Tempo.
is it?
Yeah, I have to load the script onto my phone, which acts as a teleprompter.
Mhm.
I usually set up the basement behind me. I get rid of all of the tables and all of the work surfaces and push everything to the back, and decide where I'm going to shoot, what I'm going to shoot, what I'm going to wear, if I'm going to need cover up if I look really tired or if I have a zit. Um, and that's usually takes about 20 minutes on a really good, quick, efficient shoot, but sometimes upwards to an hour to film a single episode. Uh, and in our heyday, we could shoot like 3 episodes in a day when we were releasing content really regularly. Um, and that would be the ideal way we would continue to do, is film multiple videos in a day. But these days, it is just me working on production, so it's a bit slower.
And for a while, we had access to the YouTube studios.
Yeah, that was really fun. I'm glad we got what we could there. All of our end credit scenes were filmed there on their nice white backdrop and elaborate light scheme. But alas, they closed down, and I can't imagine they're operating at all right now because of COVID.
Yeah, and one thing too is like I find that it's easy to get frustrated when you have a setback, like when you're doing really well and things are coming out really smoothly, and then you have to revert to a previous level of production where you weren't quite as efficient. And it's easy to not notice that in other people's work, but honestly that's how every production seems to work. Like everything has bumps in the road. When people make it, when their career takes off, it often has setbacks that you just aren't really noticing. And so don't take that as a sign you should quit with your creative endeavors. It's normal to have setbacks that seem like a big deal. Like I had probably the longest interview that I ever conducted for the channel have the file get corrupted in the last 15 minutes of editing it, and I lost like 2 weeks worth of work editing it. And I didn't even realize at the time how bummed out I was. Like, it took a while for it to even sink in that I'm like, I have to re-edit this thing. And I did, and it was worth it. It came out in the end, but,
Very heartbreaking to lose
yeah,
a
well,
lot of your project right when it's finished. It happens to pretty much anyone who works on a computer on a project, whether it's in an illustration or a video or even a text document can crash before it's saved.
yeah. Or you just delete your old one, your
Yeah.
good copy, and you have to fall back to an old one, or yeah. And so, um, what are there other aspects to the shooting process?
So yeah, once I film it, it sits on my hard drive for many weeks while I edit the backlog. Um, that's where we inject all the memes and edit out all my ums and likes and awkward pauses and sentence fumbles. Um,
We're working on a script that'll just replace them with memes.
yeah, oh, that would be great. Um,
Like a cat. A
Finding the
cat just
right
shows up
graphic,
over your mouth whenever
yeah, finding
whenever
the
you
right
say
graphics and clips can sometimes be incredibly time consuming. Um, and that you would think that would be like a really fast and easy part because everyone looks at memes all day. But it's not. It's it can be a lot to like, oh well, I said this one thing. So what I need is a specific pop culture reference that's buried deep in my brain, and I have to find the perfect GIF on Jiffy or on YouTube of this one thing, and nothing else will be satisfactory until it has to be,
Yeah.
because I've spent an hour looking for one clip.
Or one little moment in one TV show you watched 10 years ago and you don't really remember what episode it's in,
That's
you
right.
know.
Then music and credits. Music, I try to find a furry artist to use. I have a pretty good working relationship with Foxes and Peppers. Um, Fox is pretty good for letting us Foxamore. I was just forgetting his last name. Foxamore is pretty cool with letting us use his music catalog, and you have a few lo-fi artists who I've been featuring lately. Shojin Pa comes to mind. But I will also, if it's appropriate, use just a royalty-free music that you can get through YouTube or a royalty-free site like Intercomtech. And then, of course, everyone needs a credit in the end, and that can sometimes be very sparse, and it's just Tempo and me and the musician. But sometimes it's like, oh, a whole bunch of people put their hands in this, and we had an interview, or we referenced an expert, um, or we had a helper on set for a day. So sometimes the episode will have 15 people's names in the credits, which is
Right,
exciting.
and I've found it's really useful to, when you're working on any project where you have a number of people popping in to help, start making your thank you list as you go, so that you aren't trying to remember at the end of the project, right before you're about to upload it, like, oh, who was that helped me? Because even when someone only helps with some small specific aspect of it, it's always really nice to get that shout out in there so that they can say, oh yeah, like, I did work on that, hey, check this out, and they'll show some friends, and you never know, but like, it costs you nothing ultimately, and it's really just a matter of being a little bit more prepared. And so then, so are there other aspects of like pre-production, of like production?
Um, that's all. Like I said, we would film all of our fursuit antics ahead of time in some generic closeouts, so those usually get edited every time. And that's because I usually have like 7 minutes of jokes while wearing a silly costume while wearing my fursuit. But I only need 30 seconds of that, so it can be a different 30 seconds for every time we do a closeout. So I have to edit some fresh Rocky Horror references, so it's not the same Rocky Horror references as last time for the 5 people that will watch to the end of the video
And have seen Rocky Horror Picture Show.
and who have seen Rocky Horror, or yeah. So all that goes in pretty much fresh for every episode. Then I will upload it and tag it and do the search engine optimization garbage that the internet demands. And then it goes onto Patreon, where it lives for a brief time before it goes unlisted and scheduled for release. And then it gets tweeted and posted everywhere, and hopefully people watch it. Sometimes they don't, and it's a little disappointing. And like, oh, we didn't break 1,000 views for this one, but every view
Yeah,
counts. I don't know why that's sometimes disheartening, but it's it's a social media numbers game. Living for that adrenaline, always comparing yourself to your previous successes.
right, exactly. Like, it's very frustrating to have such a tangible meter of your success.
Yeah,
Uh,
it can be
like,
for sure. Like you can really pour your heart and soul into an episode all the way from script to final edit, and then it just not have an impact on the internet like you wanted it to or imagined it would. And then you could just like, there's something I worked on in like my spare time, and I didn't think too hard about it, and then it gets all the views.
yeah, and it is like I said before, it's a complete roll of the dice sometimes. Like, we had an audio-only interview with the guy who's the voice actor for Haida on Agretsuko.
Oh
And
yeah, I think that was just part algorithm surfing because Agretsuko came out around that time, so we were just really good with the timing.
yeah, and like
Piggybacked on their marketing, and we got like 30,000 views on that.
and then we'll post something else with like someone else who's also a voice actor on the same show, like, and get several hundred views. And like I think the like a couple of the other ones on there, like we ended up with like maybe 1,000 or a couple thousand after a while. But like that one was fantastically popular, and it was partly, the right thing at the right time. And like I think, you also like the way things go viral organically online, where like, oh yeah, this person shared it and then this person shared it, and there was a whole big proliferation of that, and then suddenly it was very popular, and because it was popular, it showed up more in the algorithms and like
Mhm.
snowballed.
And when we were first like starting out as a YouTube channel, I was not above a little publicity or favor pulling. If I knew someone who had a blog or someone who had a much more popular show than mine, and I was wanted to push a certain episode, I'd be like, "Hey, would you mind like tweeting this for me? Or can I write a blog post for your blog and have my videos like be posted there?" Um, so that's also, I would say, part of the process. Technically, we don't do that for every video, obviously, but it's very handy to call on your friends and even your close network to help spread the word.
And it's all grist for the mill. Like it's all fair game to have those things come out like on a different venue. Like have your friend mention it on their blog. Have, you know, a crossover episode with someone else. Like
Yeah,
that's
well, those
totally.
are a surprisingly very different creative process, which is why I don't do very many of them. Um, because a lot of the other furry YouTubers, they do like the really fast and easy content, which is great and works for the kind of stuff they make. But with something that's like scripted nonfiction, like what we do, it can be a lot more back and forth beforehand and planning, and then doing a synchronized launch and landing on your feet and going like this at the same time. It's a lot of work and is not as easy as YouTube would like it to be.
Well, and it's all about what you want your final product to be, too, because like making a documentary, which is essentially what we do, takes time. Like it's easy when you're watching, Planet Earth to be like, "Oh yeah, all these cool things are just happening." And really there's quite a lot of work at every stage of making a documentary compared to, say, this YouTube stream, or this panel, the streamed panel right now, where really we're just like riffing on a topic we're pretty familiar with, and it's free form, and we just kind of, if one of us forgets something, the other one brings it up. And that's, there's a place for that kind of content, certainly. But if what you want to make takes more time, it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison if you try to say, well, so and so's channel came out with 10 videos in the time it took me to come out with one. I must be doing something wrong. Really follow your muse and do it the way that you want your content to be. And eventually you will get a following. You know, the internet's a big place. There will always be some other like-minded weirdo who will like what you're into, and having your content be something that you like means that you will actually continue working on it, as opposed to giving up and doing something else. So, um, let's see. And then so that's the basics of our production process. Let's see. The stuff we have in the pipeline, I think, is our next part. So,
Yeah, I'm almost
so
done working on my fursuit, which has been a bit of a roadblock in video production because it takes up a lot of space. Um, but we have a
hashtag
big
furry problems.
That's right. We have a big fat stack of scripts that I just need to find some time to film and then even more time to edit. We have one episode coming up very soon about She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I could just bring up the list of scripts if we wanted.
In the She-Ra episode, we're basically talking about how the show is more progressive than you would even think looking at it, because we're living in an age where each show that has come out that has made waves in, the LGBT community, like Steven Universe or whatever, builds upon the previous. And so you end up with, Adora and Catra kiss in this, and it's like a canon relationship, and there are, multiple non-token gay couples in the show, and there are no straight relationships that we really see until maybe the very end. That would have been ridiculous 10 years ago. Like, you would have pitched that, and to network executives, and they would have said, well, we can't possibly do that. Like, it's a nice idea, but no. But because we have gotten to that point, it just seems natural to us. It seems normal to us that, oh, that's cute. Bo's two dads. Oh man, that's nice. What a nice little shout out. Oh, okay. And it's not really made, like, nothing in it's not made into a big deal. Like, same thing with Double Trouble. Like, Double Trouble is non-binary, and that's just a fact of life. It's not a very special episode. It's not, like, really dwelled on. It's just a part of that character, and you just roll with it, and that's something that you can do on children's television now. So, did you have other thoughts on the She-Ra one, or do you want to jump on to the next one, or?
No thoughts right now on the She-Ra. I guess you'll just have to watch it when it comes out in an indeterminate amount of time. Because we're
In the
going to put it on
future.
Patreon first.
Okay. Well, what's the next one we have in production?
We have a script about Bluey, the
Oh,
Australian
Bluey.
children's cartoon.
If you guys haven't seen Bluey yet, it's very cute. It's the one where it's all dogs and they're shaped kind of like marshmallows.
Yeah, that's a good word to describe their shapes. It is very kidsy though.
Mm-hmm.
As a cartoon connoisseur, it is a little like written down for small children.
Yeah, it's clearly in the 5 to 10-year-old bracket.
Unlike DuckTales, which any stoner of any age can enjoy.
Like, so Bluey. So to talk about that one briefly, the thing that we found intriguing about Bluey is that the parents in the show are characters and get significant screen time and aren't just an obstacle to having fun, and that makes it that has some benefits. Like, it makes it easier for parents to watch the show and put up with it, but it also means that you have a kids show trying to show you the perspective of parents, which by kind of osmosis, kids would be able to say, oh, okay, parents are also struggling and having imperfect solutions to my problems, and that's why sometimes they change the rules later and stuff like that. We brought in Moms of Furries to talk about that a little bit, which is like a furry parenting podcast. They're a hoot. We've brought them in before. So there's Bluey, and then the next one would be.
Well, I had a script which I'm not sure if I'm going to film anymore because the American election is so close. Which is the politics of being furry and how all art is political, kind of that philosophical discussion that you can't separate artists from the time and context that they live in, and that includes furry art, even if the furry art is poorly made or yiffy.
Seems shallow,
Yeah. So it was sort of an exploration on that, but might not be relevant in a few months, or
Well,
I'm not
and
sure. We'll see.
and ultimately, that's an example of what seemed like content that would hit at the right time becoming evergreen content. Like we
Yeah,
could, easily retool that into an episode for some time, and it comes out and it talks about how art is political, and trying to make your art apolitical is itself a political act, and things like that.
yeah.
So,
We have a script comparing the My Little Pony fandom to the Lion King fandom.
which I seems like a really obvious parallel to me, but maybe I'm just at the right point between the two, where I'm uh like everyone older than me in the fandom seems to have come in with things like The Lion King, and everyone younger than me in the fandom was a brony. And so,
Hmm.
um, but I think it's interesting to note that, like, just as the full impact of people who got into furry because of The Lion King wasn't just the people who were teenagers or in college or something when The Lion King came out, it was kids who watched it as like actual little kids growing up and being, bringing some of the art style and themes and persona choices with them. So too is My Little Pony. Like if you go on a college campus, like I work for a university, and when I'm on campus, all of these new college students have My Little Pony swag and My Little Pony stickers on their laptops and My Little Pony COVID masks. And they are like, yeah, they might have been involved in the fandom, but if you think about the math, like the show was on the air for like 10 years. And so,
Yeah,
and it
it had
was,
a really long run.
yeah,
Arguably, maybe a larger impact than The Lion King, but that's a little hard to measure because it's vastly different mediascapes.
yeah, yeah. And so,
Because The
like,
Lion King was the highest selling VHS tape ever produced, and that's no small feat in the era of VHS tapes. Um,
right.
but My Little Pony, you can stream illegally with a few keystrokes in your internet browser.
Or watch like a music video, like a fan music video, or a mashup, or like all these remix culture things that have been done with it. It just simply didn't happen with The Lion King. And I think like remix culture, what would the highest profile remix culture element of the Lion King fandom would be? Like what? Like fursuiters dancing to Akuna Matata, like
It's not a perfect
that's not,
analogy. It's just more
no.
of a historical comparison of how the fandom progressed. I think that was also a shorter script, so it'll probably be like a 5-minute episode. I am moving on from The Lion King. We have a script that basically outlines how to get a book published in the furry fandom.
So I have written several books, like several furry novels over the years, and
Where can
uh,
we find them?
you can find them at Fair Planet, my friendly publisher. They have all four of my novels and various other anthologies and things I've been in. And so feel free to go over to just Google Fur Planet, and you can just type in Tempo, and it'll take you to Six's Wild and Windfall series, and you can buy those there. Um, but the the thing about it is, when I'm at conventions, people ask me, a fair amount, well, how do I get my book published? And television and movies don't really prepare you for this, because like on TV, it's really dramatic if you have, an agent calling you on the phone and saying you better meet deadline, and like, you have, you know, you're locked alone in a room with a typewriter and a glass of brandy. And that's not really, aside from possibly the drinking, how most authors approach it these days. Like they have a it's a lot more social than like TV and movies tend to portray it, where you have to get out and kind of meet people and have people looking at your work, and it doesn't spring fully formed from your mind perfectly. And we have a little bit of in our society this idea that like anything that's really artistically valuable must have come from like one person who's really smart, when virtually everything that hits the market is the product of a collaboration to some degree. And so, you know, uh, so in addition to like having help with the production process for books, getting to know people in the publishing industry, and especially in furry, we're really lucky to have places like Sofa Wolf and Thurston Howell Press and Weasel Press and Fur Planet,
Well,
because
I would like
God.
Furry might not exist without our publishers. I would say they outdate the fandom itself. We have had anthropomorphic publishing houses since like the late 70s. It started with just like zines and like mail order collections, but like that's where all these companies sort of came and evolved from, and laid the groundwork to have gathering places like conventions, which is what most people would think of as the start of the fandom.
Right, that's a very good point. Like the fandom as it exists today is self-perpetuating, and that's largely due to things like furry publishing houses, which act as these engines of content production and make things available for people to buy, and allow for you to buy stuff from people you want to support so that they can make more stuff. Um, and so, as far as like the fandom being its own creative entity as opposed to a subsidiary of, a
Like
giant
a comic
corporation.
book or an anime
Yeah.
fandom where their media is made for them by giant conglomerate corporations looking to make money. Though Furry is more than happy and willing to celebrate any giant conglomerate corporate media that features anthropomorphic animals. We don't need that media necessarily. We make most of our own and perpetuate our own little microeconomy.
Right, right. Like, as much as we're happy to sell a, I don't know, knockoff Judy Hopps body pillow, or like, some sort of, I don't know, like, custom knitted rock dog hat. I don't know. I'm just describing my own Christmas list now. But like the as much as we're happy to have those things, it's also equally like common in the fandom to have stuff that has nothing to do with products from outside. Like it's just an internal production. So like, you know, if you like Lackadaisy, you can get Lackadaisy stuff, and the stuff that you buy that way directly benefits the people who are making it. So that, Tracy Butler can make more Lackadaisy stuff. And so it's really a unique ecosystem for media production in the fandom. And as furries, like, I totally encourage people to take advantage of it, because once in a while I'll run into someone who says that they don't feel like they've made it into real publication if they have only done furry stuff. And that's kind of silly. Like, if you're getting your work out there and people are buying your books, like, you've made it. It is not any artistically less valid to be at you know, a press that has a niche, because any small to mid press is going to be highly specialized in the industry anyway. You're going to have, if you write mystery stories, you are going to be, if you're not at a giant, multinational conglomerate press, you're going to be at some press that has like two to five employees that specializes in, mysteries from the point of view of talking cats or something. And they're all very niche. And the fact that Furry has some, pretty prolific ones uh, baked in and like well established is really pretty handy. So, if and so that was kind of the impetus for this episode, was to talk about the furry publishing scene and how to kind of connect with it, and even just as a consumer, how to understand what it produces and how it gets that stuff. So
The next video script I've already filmed half of because I did it about in the middle of August, and that is going to be the fursuit creation journal and the exceedingly long 2-year journey of creating that thing that's behind me and has been in the shot the whole time. I wish I was exaggerating when I said 2 years, but that's basically how long it took from concept to execution.
mhm.
Um, and let it be known, I will never take fursuit commissions because
No one can afford you.
no, I guess that, and it'll take like 5 years for them to get a fursuit.
Like, and uh, so we have that as a different kind of content than we normally would make, and we kind of come to the conclusion that it's okay to mix it up once in a while.
Absolutely, I am all for mixing it up, trying new things, bending the format. Um, Video essays, we've been doing like one thing for 70 episodes now, so let's see what else is working. And like, I feel like video essays as like a YouTube medium might be past their heyday. Like maybe that's just the algorithm. But like all of the YouTubers who inspired me to get started on my channel don't make a lot of videos anymore.
Right, like Mike Rugatella, I was big into
Yeah, Mike Rignetta,
Idea Channel, and
Vsauce rarely posts like anything. So like the YouTubers who were big 6 years ago when I was starting to write culturally aft, they're not around anymore. Really, they're either burnt out or got like TV and book deals from their awesome content. But anyway, this is really a step by step my artistic process of designing and creating and hemming and hawing and second guessing every decision, and then endless weeks and weeks of procrastination on really simple tasks to create this monster. Um, Even down to just choosing his name is too much for me to figure out. It just gives me choice paralysis. But I think I've landed on Rattles.
I'm down with it. And like,
Yeah. So
I
he'll be revealed soon, and we're also trying to workshop some like special YouTube shows that he can do, but nothing yet. It's still on the drawing board very much. So that script I still need to write and then film the second half of, because I only filmed it to when he was about 60% done, and now he's like 90% done, with the goal of finishing him up this week to unveil on Halloween, I guess via webcam somewhere. Um, yeah, so he'll be mostly done soon, with the exception of finishing touches. At which point, at some time in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I will relay the rest of my journey in something that will hopefully be less than an hour and a half.
so I've actually, I don't own any fursuits and I never have, but I've noticed that fursuiters love Halloween in a way that very few grown-ups do.
Yeah, I mean, I have an inordinate amount of costumes from many Halloweens, though this will be the first Halloween where I wear my fursuit as my Halloween costume because Halloween's effectively canceled and we're not going anywhere anyway. Um, Usually I make very elaborate and detailed, and I planned from August Halloween costumes. Um,
My favorite one was Maik. I think that was a Halloween
yeah, a few
costume.
years ago I was Maik the Liar from the Elder Scrolls series. That was more just an elaborate face mask and some drapey clothing. Um, but yeah, I have bins upon bins of costume bits that can all be assembled to be whatever it wants because I have the luxury of storage space.
Um, so let's see, but yeah, like one thing we talked about a while ago was in terms of what the channel wants to be. Whatever your platform, it always behooves you to like follow your muse. Like, make the kind of content that you actually like. I've had plenty of, you know, content producers I like over the years feel like they're stuck and then have to kind of get repetitive, like webcomics or
Yeah.
something, you know. And
It's important that you be able to watch your finished product like after the fact, after you've done editing and given it some time. I know people who are like, once I have a video up, I just never look at it again. And I'm like, why not? Aren't you curious to see how it's aged, or if like you still see the flub that you left in the edit?
if you still see it as a big deal.
Yeah. Um I would go back and watch my old episodes like all the time, especially if I did put a lot of work in it and it didn't get a lot of views. Doesn't mean I still didn't enjoy it. Maybe that's just a bit of a narcissist in me who
No,
enjoys
yeah,
watching myself on camera.
I also go back and watch old episodes because I sometimes find that there are ways that I've changed how I do things, like how I present points or something. And sometimes I've abandoned those things because they weren't working, and sometimes I just forgot to do them anymore. And going back and viewing old content reminds me of tools that I forgot I had. And so it's worth doing, just like it's worth watching other people's channels. Like, I still watch a
Mhm.
fair amount of video essay format stuff.
When
And
I first started Culturally Effed, I went to the aforementioned inspirational YouTube channels, and I went through basically frame by frame with a notepad, determining how long a meme would stay on screen, when were the cutaways, how many cutaways in a minute were there, um, how long was their opening title, and all that sort of bits to try and figure out what my pace would be and how long it is appropriate for memes and factoids and links to remain on a screen. So if you are inspired by someone, dissect how they make that thing. And even if all you have to go on is the final product, you can still learn a lot by just tearing it apart.
yeah, like it's not cheating. You know, it's not cheating to
Just
to study
research.
how the media that you like is put together. So, all right. Do we have any other ones in the shoot that we want to talk about?
I think that's it for the scripts. The last one that's more or less camera ready is a repurposed forward I made for a Canadian anthropomorphic anthology that never got published or may still yet to be published. Um, I just expanded on that and reached out to some Canadian gray muzzles to confirm some of the statements I was making. And a um, it's basically just a history of furry in Canada. And as you've just messaged me, we also have a few fursuiting a history installments to go through.
But before we jump
Originally,
into that, let's
yeah,
talk about the furry in
sure,
Canada one.
not jump too
So
far. Yeah,
so one of the things that I've found is that like there are a bunch of Canadian furries, but it's really easy to forget that because
Mhm.
you know, like talking to, I mean, would you know which of us is the American listening to this stream? You know, r-
Which one of us lives further north?
right.
It may surprise.
Hmm.
The answer might surprise you.
And the thing is, like, so much of the furry media that we watch is made in Canada too, and we just don't really process it, or partly made there. Like My Little Pony is made at DHX, which is largely based in Canada. Like Lower Decks is made by and I think also Regular Show and BoJack were all made by Titmouse, which is based
Not
on the
sure.
East Coast of
Right.
Canada, and like it's a lot of it's made there and a lot of fans live there, but when people talk about the North American furry scene, they almost always talk about like Anthrocon, further
Yeah,
confusion.
the American cons are bigger just because of the sheer numbers and population. But yeah, and Canada just generally smaller, but there have always been people going to the cons and crossing the border to get their hands on media and content that would be otherwise seized at the border. There's a fun paragraph about like furry smut bootleggers who would smuggle these boxes of furry if across the border because if you try to send it through the mail, our long and old strange publishing history between American and Canadian publishers means that pretty much any book you send through the border will be inspected, and any book deemed inappropriate by either customs agents will be um, like
Bounced.
confiscated.
Yeah.
And that includes anything queer or furry. Apparently, back in the '90s, it's probably less of a problem now, but I know I've contributed to a Kickstarter and never got my book, so
Well, and ultimately it's because it comes down to the personal inclinations and uh, like lack of knowledge and context of particular border agents who will have no idea what we're doing
yeah.
and just open it and go and be scandalized. And
Yeah, anyway, Canada just being smaller, the gist of it is that it had the village effect and it had the small community longer than a lot of the Americans cons who kind of grew in popularity and broke into the thousands and eventually tens of thousands of attendees.
like
So
Camp
it's a slow
Farrell.
start, but and yeah, we have like the longest running camping con, Camp Farrell, which has been going for I think 26 or 27 years.
And has
Um,
become a model of sorts for other conventions
yeah,
like it.
yeah. Like there's been copycat cons of that all over the world. Um, so yeah, Canada's contributed its fair share of furriness, both fandom wise and um, like big corporate media.
So
And yeah, do you want to move on to the final installments of Fursuit history, which were originally just going to be one, the future of fursuits. But as we were writing and researching, we realized we need to create a whole nother episode for a certain topic.
the first one I think is sustainability.
Uh, yeah, I think originally it was going to be just the future of fursuits, and it was going to talk about the technology inside fursuits and what is not only at the cutting edge right now, but what is potentially coming up in the future in a few years. I remember Tempo's first draft of that script was very futurist and incredibly speculative. So I was like,
Right.
this is great, but I'm not sure if we're going that far in the future.
Right, like genetic engineering your first,
Yeah,
like, yeah, why not have that in there? Well,
grow your fursuit.
yeah, grow your fursuit and then like take it out and wear it and it like lives off of your body and
Yeah, that's not quite what I envisioned originally, but the current script is much closer to what I envisioned, which is more about like 3D printing and like neural reading ears and tails, which are commercially available, and other such fun and exciting tech.
yeah, like cooling systems and things that monitor your eye movements and have little
Yeah,
LED
like a
screens move
internal
and
heads-up display and an external LED display.
yeah. So like
Um,
those are emerging technologies of the
yeah,
fursuit
and of
world.
course the other script that evolved out of that, which was something on my mind for a long time but never actually got to script form until kind of recently, was fursuits and sustainability, and how the fiber and fabric we use to make fursuits are really, really bad for the environment, the thing we all like and don't want to hurt more.
I use the environment every day.
Yeah, we live there. Um, but it's faux fur is basically a petroleum product made from raw oil, sometimes recycled plastics, and then of course it has to be dyed and colored, which no matter what material you're dyeing and coloring fabric is really bad for the environment too. And then there's of course the ethical bag of worms, which is ethical fur farming. And if you even want a fursuit made of real fur, if it was ethically sourced, like it's a
Would it
big
be
headache.
practical?
Yeah,
Kind of.
it wouldn't be very comfortable. It'd be very, very warm. And hard to maintain because a lot of natural furs actually should be refrigerated if they're going to be taken care of for a long time. And I don't know about you, but I do not have a fursuit sized freezer just lying around.
Yeah, like and
So yeah, it's sort of, we talk a bit about that and look at some companies that are trying to make like sustainable biodegradable faux furs and like encouraging the use of other recycled materials and scrapped and upcycled fabrics. And the
ultimately
like.
it's a multi-pronged approach is really what our takeaway on that one is, like
Yeah,
having biodegradable fursuit uh fake fur
yeah, and that
is
conversation
one
really
step.
started in Future, where we were talking about like what's the next step for the material itself, and that's obviously going to be sort of natural started to really
uh I don't know if you glitched out for me, but I will continue speaking. um but anyway, yeah, so that one's really about the
Oh,
you know idea that we could have biodegradable fursuit fur, and we could have components that you're using more wisely, and like having venues for having people make fursuit fur, like make the remainders of rolls of fursuit fur into suits and things like that, because ultimately, like, recycle or like biodegradable fur won't completely replace everything else on the market instantly, and so it's best, while we're transitioning away from basically crude oil originating fur to like plant-based stuff, basically the same stuff that's like those plant bottles, um is in the meantime having better practices in place. Have you joined us again, Arrkay?
it seems so. I don't know what
Okay.
happened. Just an
um
internet hiccup. Nope, I'm gone. I'm back. I'm
you're
gone again.
back,
All
it's
right.
fine.
Well, to let you guys know, we do have less than 3 minutes until the next panel.
We'll
So,
wrap.
do you think this might be a good time to wrap it up and
Yeah,
start transitioning?
so thanks for
I
joining us.
Yeah, make sure you subscribe to Culturally Effed on YouTube. Find us on Twitter. We're fairly active as well. I am RK the Bird. You can find me on Twitter under the same name.
I'm Tempo Rights on Twitter, and yeah, just search for Culturally After YouTube and check out our content.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you for hosting us, OwOmacon. Make sure you donate to the Brown County Humane Society of Kansas.
All right.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you guys again. We
You got it.
will start transitioning to the next panel, so hold tight for a couple minutes and we'll do live art with Foxbrush.